Hoop 7 proudly brings to you Basketball Hustle.
Ellis fumbled the ball. 2 on the shot clock. Goes up a prayer. Yes! As he was falling to the ground, it's a 3. He shot it literally from the hip.
Definitely a highlight.
Here come the Billikens. 4 on 2. McCall. Ellis. Left corner.
We're missing out.
Bang! From way down under. Cody Ellis. Reddick brings low out away from the basket. Stolen away by Cody Ellis. One man to beat. To the hole. He's fouled. Layup. Good. Whistle foul. Count the basket.
Ellis for the reverse. Through fingertips. What a move. Ellis drops in a bomb. I love seeing Cody Ellis coming out, feeling good.
Ellis. Cody Ellis. Ellis. Pull-up jumper. Cody Ellis. Bang. Cody Ellis, can he stand and deliver? Cody Ellis.
Now it's time for another episode of Hoops Heaven's Basketball Hustle.
Hello and welcome to Hoop 7's Basketball Hustle. And all of a sudden, Cody, we're halfway through a championship series, or maybe not quite halfway through if we end up going to Game 5, but we're 2 games in between the Sydney Kings and the New Zealand Breakers. We're tied at 1-1. We've had 2 big crowds in Sydney and Auckland. We've got 2 more big crowds already set to go this weekend for Games 3 and Game 4. So we'll get into all of that on this week's show. And the MVP has found an NBA home, Cody. Fascinating that he's now in the middle of a championship series as the captain, battling all sorts of physical ailments, but he's now getting ready to join the NBA as well as soon as the series is over. The WNBL Finals will begin this weekend. Your NBL season at the Warwick Senators is getting very close, Cody, and we've got a big name back in the league this season that you're about to battle with as well. So we'll get your thoughts on that. We're here thanks to Hoop 7, of course, but everyone has tuned in to hear from you, Cody. Cody Ellis, the former Illawarra Hawks, Sydney Kings power forward, the Warwick Senators captain. Been another big week.
Certainly has, mate. Certainly has. And look, series tied 1-1. It's kind of how you want it. You know, we definitely want it to go to 5, and we both, I think, picked it to go to 5. So hopefully it does reach that. But look, big games on this weekend.
Absolutely. So Friday night, Game 3, back in Sydney, and already we're set to get more people there than the 13,500 that were at game 1, which is fantastic. I'm pretty sure it's going to be another sellout. I think they're looking to set a record at Spark Arena on Sunday for Game 4 as well. So I think when we spoke about a month ago, Cody, we talked about how there's every chance if these 2 teams played in a championship series, we might get close to 60,000 people across 5 games. Yeah. If this goes to 5 games, it's going to get very close to that number.
Yeah, it certainly is, and that's awesome. Yeah. That's great, and I think even the TV audience would be unbelievable as well. So no, look, it's good. The NBL is certainly on the up and up, and the crowds are certainly showing that. No,
for sure. And we're here thanks to Hoop 7. So at this time of year, all the competitions are starting to gear up, whatever level you're playing at. So if you need anything basketball related, head to hoop7.com.au anywhere in the country, or if you're in Perth, Cody, it's a great time to pop into the store on Murray Street.
Certainly is. Pop in. Keep an eye on the socials for all the new drops, and look, get in there as soon as you can.
No, absolutely. So thank you to Hoop 7 for making this show possible. I'm going to start, before we get into the championship series, Xavier Cooks. We've talked all season long about if he has an NBA future. Well, he does now, because he has a contract that he's signed. He's signed for the rest of this season and all of next season at the Washington Wizards. Fantastic news for him, and well deserved.
Oh, absolutely. It's awesome, and I think it was more of when than if with Xav, and look, I think that's awesome. Extremely well deserved, and it's going to be interesting to see what Sydney do with him for the rest of the series, because he is battling some heavy knocks from the past few games he's played, and we saw that in Game 2 where he only played 9 minutes. Yep. So, yeah, look, it's going to be interesting. He'll want to play, obviously, and I'm sure they'll want him to play, but I think, his future, and especially going over to the NBA, is probably that bit more important.
It's a fascinating conundrum to have, isn't it? Because he wants to be as close to 100% as possible once he arrives in Washington, but he also wants to arrive with another championship ring on his on his finger as well. I actually think his ankle's okay right now, that he was battling late in the series against Cairns, but he just copped a couple of corks in that Game 1 against New Zealand that he really struggled to play through in Game 2. I mean, 5 days in between games, is that enough for him to get healthy, or is there every chance we don't see much more of him at all?
Look, you're right. I think it was certainly the corkies that really got the better of him in that Game 2. You could see even the little bits of warm up that you could see he wasn't moving right, and then that first few minutes he just up and about, but just couldn't really move. Came off within about 2 minutes of the game, and then talking to the medical staff and trying to keep it warm and loose, and then got back out there and just couldn't go. So look, 5 days is a lot of time with corkies. They're usually really sore for 3-4 days. So I think it is plenty of time. I think he'll be put on ice for this whole week, obviously.
Yes.
But look, I think we do see him again. But yeah, I think Walton is the other one that's a bit of a scary one.
No, for sure. I'll get to him. But just on Zave, if for some reason the Wizards tell the Kings that we don't want him playing, he's our player now, we've got him under contract, do the Kings have no choice but to not play him in these last 3 games?
Oh, I'm sure there'd be a bit of back and forth with it for sure. But yeah, that'd be a tough one. That would be a tough one for a Washington team that isn't going to make a whole lot of noise in the coming months. Yeah, it'd be a very interesting one. I'm not sure. They'd obviously, I think they'd have to say, look, okay, that's fine. Like, end of the day, they probably own his rights now. So, look, I can't really see them doing that. I don't think they would. But yeah, that would be certainly throwing a spanner in the works for the Kings.
It's an interesting one because we've seen just recently in the WNBA where Steph Talbot has her WNBA contract, which was out here playing for the Adelaide Lightning. She's done her ACL and now she's still under contract, but her team in the WNBA has had to suspend her, so then they aren't paying her for this season. So it's I know it's different in the NBA, but gee, it's a tricky situation.
Oh, it certainly is. But I think God forbid if something did happen like that, then I think Washington would have every right to do the same thing. And it's such a crazy thing, sports, with that kind of stuff going on, that you want them playing. You want them coming in the best shape and all that sort of stuff. But you can't really wrap players in bubble wrap because it doesn't really work like that. That's usually when they do get hurt. So look, I think it's certainly an interesting scenario, and be interesting to see what happens.
It's amazing to think. We're talking about how important he is to the Sydney Kings winning this championship or not, but in 2 weeks' time, he's going to be in a Washington Wizards uniform. What sort of immediate impact can he have once he gets there?
Oh, look, I think there's going to be a little bit of treading the water and trying to find his feet a bit once he gets there. NBA is a different beast. He's athletic in our league. He's not athletic.
He's just a normal player.
Yeah, exactly. He's not overly athletic in the NBA.
And probably not that strong.
No, but I think one of the things I'm excited to see is how his shot gets better. All the teams over there have specialized guys that they send them to, and specialized shot doctors that they like to call. And look, I think that's something that we'll see him progress the most with. Every other facet of his game has just improved out of sight since we've seen him with the Kings here, and that's certainly something that I'm looking forward to seeing him improve on.
Last one, and then we'll get into the Championship Series. How important is it for his confidence that he can go there, find his feet, and get used to working out how to play in the NBA, knowing that he's got a contract for next season as well? He doesn't have to rush. He can take his time and find his feet.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. And look, Washington is a bit of a younger squad. I think that it's probably the perfect fit for him, really. So look, I think it's going to be really good. I think that he's, like I said, he's going to take some time to find his feet for sure, because it's a different ball game. But I think the rest of this season will be really good for him to just figure out where he slots into the team and the roster, and I guess how to be an NBA player.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we wish him all the best, and we wish him all the best over the next 2 weeks as well to see if he wins another championship. So before we go into game by game, Cody, the series is tied at 1-1. What stood out to you over the last 2 games? And if you had to pick one team that has the advantage after 2 games, who would it be?
I can't really pick an advantage, to be honest with you. It's look, I think New Zealand really squandered a chance to make a massive statement and go up 2-0 in this series. I think with Walton only playing 4 or 5 minutes and Zay playing 9 minutes, I think that kind of got into their head a little bit. Because they played game 2 as if it was just they were just gonna at some point turn it on and breeze through. it was a very odd game to watch. So, look, they came out in game one in Sydney, ready and raring to go, up and about. Will McDowell-White was unbelievable, and then he was a shadow of himself in that second game. You know, I think, and this is one of those things that we spoke about in New Zealand, have that tendency to kind of lose their offensive mindset and aggressiveness. And we did see that in game two at home. They just couldn't score. And look, lots of credit goes to Sydney with the way they defended, and they just looked like they were more up and in, and all led by Justin Simon, who was unbelievable. But yeah, it was two very different New Zealand teams that we saw. I think Sydney were very similar in the way they played in games 1 and 2. Obviously undermanned in game 2, and you know, you had some of those guys step up. Quatnoy was awesome. He was so good. He came out aggressive and just kind of continued. DJ hit some big shots. You know, Angus Glover coming out being really good for him. But yeah, it was a very odd game. Game 2.
Yeah, it was. So game 1 in Sydney on Friday night, the Breakers 95-87 ended up winning, but to me, it felt like a game that they were in control of pretty much the whole way, and a lot of it was Will McDowell-White. It was just we talked about which point guard could have the biggest influence on the game between him and Derek Walton Jr., and even when Derek Walton was still out there before he went off early in the fourth quarter, Will McDowell-White was the standout performer of the game. 19 points, 9 rebounds, 9 assists, 2 steals, and he just played like that, like that floor general, that playmaker that could just make everything else click for them. As good a game from a point guard as you could find.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, like you said, he controlled the game from start to finish. You know, I think that they did a great job of running everything through him. And he just kind of had his way with the defense. Whereas you saw game 2, he kind of played on his back foot a little bit. It was, I don't know whether it was Justin Simon being that a little bit more up in his personal space and making him do that, or what the deal was, because there were two different Will McDowell-Whites we saw.
And then in game 1, Barry Brown Jr. was pretty quiet for 3 quarters, but then, as we've seen all season long, when they need a spark, he really steps up, and I think 13 of his 19 points came in that fourth quarter.
Yeah, he was unbelievable, and it's just one of those things that when they need a score, he seems to be that guy every single time, and he's done it throughout the entire season. Even with his hurt hand, it's almost even more impressive. But look, I think he probably needs to stay super aggressive throughout the whole game. You know, I think he can't really leave it to the fourth quarter. I think he needs to come in and, you know, Modi kind of tried to do that in that second game. He injected him fairly early and didn't really get it going. So no, look, he was unbelievable game 1.
So with New Zealand winning on the road in game 1, both Xavier Cooks and Derek Walton hurt, how big of an advantage did you think that they had after game 1? Yeah,
I thought it was massive. I thought that they'd be going back to Sydney up 2-0 for sure. So, look, like I said, to kind of squander that opportunity in game 2 it's got to be disheartening. But you know, all of a sudden it's back in Sydney's court now. The ball is back in Sydney's court, and they got the home court advantage now.
On the back of both Cooks and Walton being hurt, we didn't know what would get out of them in game 2, but they virtually didn't play. I mean, they almost might as well not have turned up to play. So Cooks ended up playing 9 minutes, 2 points, 4 rebounds. Walton played 5 minutes, and he just looked like he couldn't move. I mean, 0 points, 2 rebounds, 1 turnover. They virtually didn't play. Yeah,
pretty much. I think Zave played more minutes than he should have. I think that second time he came out,
probably shouldn't have come back the second time.
No, he shouldn't have. But it's one of those things that you want to be out there, especially as the leader of that team. So yeah, they played without them. They really had Sean Bruce running the show for the game, and you know he did a really good job. He was really good for them. And then you know you had those other guys step up, and that's been the advantage of the Kings all year is their depth, and we've spoken about it all the time. Is how deep they go. Yeah, and they really showed up.
They had so many guys step up, but I still think the difference between the two teams was Justin Simon. It doesn't stand out in the numbers, 12 points, 9 rebounds, 6 steals. If you're, I guess, a layman, that doesn't stand out.
No.
But his energy and his hustle, when he stole 3 possessions almost in a row in that third quarter, went for a couple of dunks up the other end. One was a foul that he turned into points as well. that's when Sydney took over that game for good, really, and they were never really in trouble from there. It was, for a game that's relatively quiet on the stat sheet, it's probably as influential a game as you'll find.
Oh, absolutely. I think that was one of the better playoff performances I've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
But you're right, doesn't show up on the stat sheet.
No.
And, that's one of the things I was sitting there watching go and see. Defensive Player of the Year right there. I think he really turned the screws on that end of the floor. And, you heard him say that Chase Buford called him out in film.
Yeah.
So, and he took it personally. And, I mean, he certainly did that. He came out and proved that he is an absolute menace on that end of the floor. And even offensively, I think he was aggressive. He probably missed a couple little bunnies that I'm sure he'd probably wish he got back to try again. But look, he hit a big three late in a shot clock late as well. And just kind of every time New Zealand started making a bit of a run, he would do something that would turn the tide back into Sydney's way.
Absolutely. And we talk about McDowell-White. I think there was a lot of talk after game one. And I think Chase, I want to get your thoughts on this. Chase Buford, I would imagine as a head coach, you probably don't need to pay a lot of attention to social media, but I have a feeling he reads a lot of what is said because post game on Sunday, he took aim at some of the Twitter folk about how, they were calling him out for the way that they defended McDowell-White in game one and how they needed to change the way they defended him in game two. Yep. He pointed out that he didn't change much at all, except it was their effort that was a lot better in game two, and I think throwing Justin Simon at McDowell-White made the world of difference. Firstly, what do you think of Chase taking notice of some of these Twitter critics? And also, did you notice much different that they did in game two? Yeah,
look, I mean, Chase is one of the younger coaches around. So, he's kind of grown up with that social media presence. And as it's evolved, he's kind of been in and around it for sure. Yeah. So, look, I think it kind of adds fuel to the fire a bit. So I'm sure he doesn't take a whole lot of notice of it, but, bits and pieces. I mean, enough people talk about it. So, look, I don't think they did a whole lot different. I think you're right. I think they just really just tightened the screws a bit. Yeah. They kind of let Will McDowell-White just kind of quarterback the game in that first one.
It was also easy for him, wasn't it?
It was. And, obviously you see what he could do. And then, Justin Simon, like I said, right up into his personal space, almost sitting in his jocks the whole game.
When you're a point guard and you get it stolen off you possession after possession,
demoralising.
It has to be, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And look, I mean, he put him on his back foot from the get go, and he kind of looked like he didn't want a bar of it. He'd give the ball up early and came back to get it a couple times, but missed a couple early shots, and then all of a sudden you just saw kind of his head and shoulders drop a little bit. Yeah. So look, I mean, in terms of scout-wise, I don't think they did a whole lot different. I think you're right. It was just trying to tighten the screws.
Yeah, I mean, the difference, we talked about it a lot, but 7 points and 6 turnovers in game two for McDowell-White, 2 of 8 shooting. I mean, just a totally different player.
Yeah, exactly. A shadow of himself, like I mentioned before, and I'm sure that they'll look to do that again come game three.
And then you had the role players for the Kings. So you had Courtney, 20 points, 9 of 13 free throws. So he was really aggressive inside. DJ Vasiljevic hasn't shot the ball at a great percentage all season, but 4 or 6 from 3-point land. Angus Glover made some big shots. Geordie Hunter, another one that the stats won't say a lot. I think he only scored 4 points, but 10 rebounds as well was really important. Also, and as you said, Sean Bruce playing that crucial role. Depth has been their great strength all season, and this is why.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think Geordie Hunter definitely, again, didn't really bother the stat sheet too much. The 10 boards was huge. Yeah. But I just think defensively, just his size was a problem for New Zealand and especially Derek Pardon.
Yeah. Derek Pardon, we talked about how he was going to be a massive presence in this series, but 2 games in and he hasn't been. I mean, you look at his numbers, 15 points and only 12 rebounds, including 1 rebound in game one, even though they won the game. He was almost a non-factor in both games.
Yeah, a little bit. It's an interesting one. I feel like he's almost trying too hard to assert himself instead of letting the game come to him. And it's one of those teams that it's hard for him to really go off. The Kings really like to pack the paint. So they pack the paint, they dare you to shoot threes, and then they run out of it. So with a guy like Pardon who is only really going to score in the charge circle, really, it's difficult for him to get going. I think it's really got to come from Will McDowell-White. Just his attack on the rim. I think those little dump-offs to him.
Well, they have a great pick-and-roll chemistry.
Exactly.
Usually, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, especially Brown as well, coming in, attacking.
Yep.
I think finding those little dump-offs. But, in game one, Will had his way and could just score pretty much at ease. So it was difficult to get him the ball. And then game two, you saw, he was on his back foot, so he wasn't getting in the paint the way he was in game one. And it's been really hard for him to kind of find a rhythm.
Yeah, it has been. All right, so I'll get your thoughts on what we expect to see in games 3 and game 4 later in the show, Cody. But just before we take a break, by Sunday night, how are you feeling about the series?
It's interesting. It's very interesting. It's it really was a tale of two completely different games.
Yep.
And I feel like game 1 was a lot more physical than game 2 was allowed to be. And we spoke about how it was going to be reffed and how that was going to affect it. So look, I think this weekend is going to be huge. It doesn't seem either of these two teams want to win on the home floor, does it?
No.
So,
it's amazing. All season long, through their 3 meetings in the regular season, now two games in this series. The away teams won every one of them.
Every single one. It's wild. It's crazy for two really good teams like this for that to have happened. So, look, I think a lot's going to rely on the health of Xav and Willetton.
All right, Cody, let's take a deep breath. We'll come back, and then we've got a lot more to catch up with and look forward to at the end of the show.
Sounds good.
Okay, back on Hoop 7's Basketball Hustle, and delighted to be joined once again by the Adelaide 36ers Hall of Famer, the only man involved with every Adelaide 36ers championship, Scott Ninnis. It's been a couple of weeks, Scott. How do we find you right now?
Oh, excellent. Thanks, Chris. Always good to catch up and have a chat. So, very strange weather going on in Adelaide at the moment. It's been raining the last couple of days, which is very, very strange for this time of the year and fairly cool. I'm wearing a jumper, which is hard to believe in March. But, no, all good here, mate. Enjoying NBL Finals and gearing up for our NBL1 season as well. So, a lot happening, but, all good here, mate.
It's a very busy time, isn't it? All of a sudden, only a bit over 2 weeks away from your championship defence starting at South Adelaide, so I'll get your thoughts on that a bit later. But we'll get straight into the NBL Championship Series. Scott, before I get your thoughts on the first 2 games between the Kings and the Breakers, what did you make of the semi-final series? Did you feel like the best 2 teams ended up getting through?
I think so. I think, there's probably a lot of us that would have loved to have seen, the Cairns and Jack Jumpers, and there are a lot of people, I guess, other favourite teams. It would have been great to see them through. But I've been pretty consistent over the last, month or so when I've been talking to people that I felt that New Zealand were probably the only team that I felt could beat the Sydney Kings. Yeah. So I think from that point of view, I'm glad that they got through, and obviously that showed in game 1 that they were up to the task. So, I do. I think the 2 best teams got through, and it's been a really interesting series so far, and looking forward to see what pans out from here.
Yeah, the first 2 games couldn't have been more contrasting. I'll get your thoughts on those shortly. Before we got to the actual series, we had an almost 2-week break. It was an unfortunate, I guess, set of circumstances where I guess you couldn't do a lot about when the FIBA window was placed, and they had no choice, to not be able to play during that week. But what did you make of that? If you were part of one of the grand final teams, how frustrating would have that been?
Oh, look, I hate it as a spectator. I think, the NBL has done a lot of things right, over the last few years. I mean, this was just, it's just taken, people started to move on. The AFL pre-season's happening, and especially in, places like Adelaide and Perth and Melbourne, that sort of takes precedence now. And I just think there was such great momentum going into then to have that break, and especially with not having anyone that was involved in the final series involved in that, FIBA break, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and I think it's taken a bit of the, momentum basketball had going forward, a bit of a luster off this series, which is, I speak to a lot of people, obviously, and a lot of people have, who probably normally would be right into it now, it's almost seen as a bit of an afterthought, which I think is a bit of a shame.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think especially outside of Sydney, where I think they still did a good job to get 13,500 people there, and outside of Auckland, where it was a sold-out building, and it'll be another sold-out building on Sunday. It's tough to lure in, I think, the casuals. I mean, I think we saw that for almost 10 years, where every time we got to a grand final series, it was Perth and New Zealand playing. The rest of the country almost switched off, and I kind of feel like that might be the case now outside of New Zealand and Sydney, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's certainly the sense I'm getting, apart from the diehards that will watch anything. But yeah, I think that has happened. Once again, I mean, you're 100% right. I mean, Sydney getting 13,000 people to that game is incredible, especially when there was Harry Styles was playing next door on the same night, and
NRL season started last week too.
Yeah, so I just think we should be over with now. We should have had a champion crown, and the momentum going forward would have been unbelievable, and people would have been on board, because we just would have flown from the semi-final series into the championship series. But it is what it is, unfortunately. But hopefully that's something that if the situation like this doesn't happen again.
I feel like the teams didn't enjoy it either, and we saw so many players cramping in the second half, especially of game one, and they were just so rusty as well. I mean, it's tough to play after 2 weeks. You just can't replicate that sort of intensity at training, so I don't think the teams enjoyed it either, did they?
Oh, absolutely not. And you're 100% right. You can't, no matter how good your training sessions are, you can't replicate what happens during a game. And, you're right. You saw, it was really unusual scenes in that first game. To see players cramping and what we saw go down, which has impacted, with a couple of star players, obviously into game two. But once again, there has to be a better solution, and that better solution is to keep that momentum rolling and get straight in that. And to me, even playing Friday, Sunday, and then waiting till the next Friday, to me is losing a bit of momentum as well. So I'm sure the players involved would probably disagree. I'm sure everyone's happy to have a bit of a rest leading up to this game three, and hopefully we see both teams trot out their best lineups, and hopefully the best team will win.
It is interesting, isn't it? You've got almost now a week before game three, but then you've only got 36 hours in between the Friday and the Sunday games. It's a little bit strange, isn't it?
Yeah, I would have thought something like a Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, like something like that. And I know you can never predict who's going to make it, and obviously if a New Zealand is in it, or a Perth, or the travel time is a lot more than if it was, say, an Adelaide Melbourne series, obviously. But I would have liked to see something where it's every third day or something. You've got a game, and you just, once again, you keep that momentum going, and you just get a steady stream of Championship Series basketball rammed down your throat.
Yeah, I think so too. But as for the action on the court, game one was fascinating. I just felt Will McDowell-White controlled that game almost completely, was allowed to just run the ship for the Breakers, and as a result, I felt like the Breakers were in control of that game pretty much the whole way. And then if you factor in that Xavier Cooks and Derek Walton Jr. went down hurt, and then were virtually non-factors at all in game two, and it was played in Auckland, it felt like everything was pointing towards the Breakers going up 2-0, but for whatever reason, they just never seemed to get into top gear on Sunday. And the Kings had all their role players that stepped up. Courtney was terrific, DJ Vasiljevic, Angus Glover, even Jordan Hunter. And then I just felt Justin Simon was the difference in the game. I mean, between the two games, they just couldn't have been more contrasting. No,
it's been a fascinating series so far. I think, Justin Simon, that 3 or 4 minute stretch he had in the third quarter was, we've seen Antonius Cleveland do a similar thing here in games where he just dominates the game defensively, and he turned that game on its ear. And I think what Sydney show, the grit and toughness that those, well, not necessarily role players. I mean, they got some pretty, even the guys you mentioned are, very, very good basketball players. Yeah. But, they suffocated the life out of New Zealand in that game. And that's the sort of game as a coach you sit back and that is exactly what you want to see. Just such a great defensive game. I can't help but think that this is the one that New Zealand are really going to sit back and rue that game at when this series is all done and dusted, because they win that game, and it's a funny thing, isn't it? Like, you see two stars players going out, and it doesn't matter what you say. Sometimes you do tend to take your foot off the pedal and think you're going to walk over the top of them. But to Sydney's credit, they outstanding in that game. But I sort of think that this is maybe something that New Zealand might not come back from. I've just got a funny feeling now that Sydney might put them to the sword, in the next couple of games. And I hope I'm wrong, because probably like the rest of Australia, New Zealand, we probably would love to see the Sydney Kings not win, because there is an arrogance about them that is that does my head in a little bit. I mean, I always talk to players about winning with class and losing with class, and they don't tend to do either of those things well. I don't think so. But I just think that they might, that game might have shifted the momentum completely back in favour of the Kings, and I wouldn't be surprised if they win this next two games and win the championship.
It's a remarkable thing that we still haven't seen in all 5 times these two teams have met this season. The home team win a game. So going into a Friday night in Sydney, and we're expecting another terrific crowd. I think they've sold well over 13,000 tickets already, so we might get upwards of 15,000 people there, which will be terrific. But do you get a feeling we might see the shift and finally see a home team get a win in this series?
Yeah, I think so. I think, like I said, I think that New Zealand are going to really rue that missed opportunity in Game 2. I think the Kings will come out and they'll, the confidence that they'll take from winning that game in New Zealand, they'll bring that back home. You'd imagine after 5 days, the Willetton Junior and Cooks will be good to go, and obviously, Cooks will be buoyed by the NBA opportunity he's going to get. I think that with 15,000 fans on their back, I think it'll be enough to sway the series back to Sydney.
Yep. All right. So we'll see how it plays out. But I want to get your thoughts on Xavier Cooks. So firstly, we put the vote out to our listeners here on the show, Scott, about the winner of the Galen Award for the best team man this season. We narrowed it down to Xavier Cooks and Antonius Cleveland, and it was Xavier Cooks that ended up winning the votes across our social media platforms. And we plucked out a lucky winner thanks to Sports Card World as well, and that was Andrew French. So congratulations to Andrew, and he'll win, thanks to Sports Card World, 6 packs of the NBA Hoops 2022-23 cards, valued at $66. So thank you to all of our listeners for voting, and thank you to Sports Card World for that prize. But firstly, about Xavier Cooks, Scott, are you pretty happy that he won that award? And secondly, pretty happy that he's got an NBA opportunity now to play at the Washington Wizards, not only for the rest of this season, but he's got a contract for next season too.
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't think there'd be too many people that would, argue the fact that won the league MVP, which I know I've sort of spoken about. I still think that is probably debatable, but to me, Bryce Cotton, as I've said to you in the past, is the MVP of the league. But certainly no argument when you're talking about the award, the Galen Award. I think that's no one would have too many issues with that. As far as the NBA, I think it's a fantastic opportunity. I think once again it narrows that gap between the NBA and the rest of the world. Look, I'm a little bit surprised. I think he's probably going to be maybe a little bit undersized for the position he'll play over there, and when you look at the weaknesses in his game, which is perimeter shooting and free throw percentages, that has the potential to be exposed. But once again, his work ethic and what he brings to the table in just about every facet of the game is hard to overlook. So it's I think it's a great opportunity. Like I played against his dad and coached against his dad as assistant coaches. We used to swap tape of opposing teams, even though both our head coaches told us not to deal with the other club because everyone hated each other that stage. So look, I think it's a fantastic feather in his cap, and to get a 2-year deal is unreal. So once again, I think it just puts a focus on Australian basketball and shows the talent that we really do have. And just to touch back on one thing you were talking about with McDowell-White, I mean, to me that game one that he played, was like watching Josh Giddey. Like just the control that he had over that game, and he just had all the time in the world, and just that big point guard that looks like he's got all the time in the world. I thought, he looked like he was playing himself into an NBA contract as well. And I think obviously the focus of, there would have been a lot of NBA people watching that game. And I think he's, he potentially could be the next guy that takes that step. So, no, it's an exciting time for Australian basketball, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And just touching on Josh Giddey, he's in a remarkable run of form himself right now for Oklahoma City. He had another 17 points, 17 assists, 11 rebounds. Just today as well. He's playing some incredible basketball as well.
I saw the half-time stats. So he had 10 assists at half-time against the Golden State Warriors, if you don't mind. Yeah. So, look, I think, and that's what I like about McDowell-White. You've got that, that extra space in the floor in the NBA, and there's two tall guards, that can have the ability to see over people and are poised, and it's great to see. And old mate of ours, Joe Ingles, has had a couple of good games as well, and could almost play himself into a championship ring. So no, it's fantastic to see.
No, it sure is. A little bit quiet on the Adelaide 36ers front, Scott, and that's probably because they can't announce any signings right now, and you can't exactly announce players leaving until the free agency window opens. So it's pretty quiet. But are you hearing much out of the 36ers camp?
No, not a lot. I think there's there's obviously probably a lot of moving parts behind the scenes, but we do have guys signed for next year in Mitch McCarron, Sunday Detch, Cleveland, Franks and Galloway, I believe as well. I think the feeling is that Franks probably won't be back, but that once again that remains to be seen and play out. I think the club sort of knows the areas that they need to fill, but once again I think we get this championship series over and done with, and there's obviously chatter and talk going on behind the scenes, whether it's technically legal or not at this stage, but people always talking to each other, and look, I think it's going to be an interesting off season for the Sixers. I think we obviously have probably haven't achieved what we would have liked over these last few years, and it's going to be a big year, and I think it needs to be a year where we take like a sort of fairly major step back in the right direction and get involved playing playoff basketball again, and I think that's very, very achievable. I think it's we might make the right decisions and bring in the right people to add to what we've already got. So but no, very, very quiet here at the moment. There's not a lot of chatter going on, but I think I'd imagine that would change fairly quickly.
Next week, when the championship has been decided, we'll have a bit more time and we'll do a proper sort of preview of your NBL1 season and your championship defence at South Adelaide, Scott. But just quickly, a couple of weeks out from the season, how are your preparations going?
Yeah, good. I mean, you always want more time. We had a very interesting, I've been basically looking for, someone to replace Jeremy Smith the entire off-season and trying to replace, the leading scorer and best player in the league. 6'3" shooting guard has been, I've watched a lot of highlight tapes of a lot of different guards from all around the world, and look, let's face it, everybody looks good in the highlight tape, but it was basically a chance conversation at the 36ers MVP dinner, and I've now signed Daniel Johnson, so I've replaced
Wow.
I've replaced a 6'3" shooting guard with a 6'11". We all know what DJ's like, so it's really exciting for us. It does change our style of game completely, but once again, I've probably replaced the best offensive player in the league from last year with what I would imagine is probably going to be the best offensive player in the league this year. So, We still have Alex Starling, who was Defensive Player of the Year last year. I think that him and DJ is a match made in heaven. I think you got two guys who have differing strengths to each other and can really open up the floor for each other. So yeah, very, very exciting, and it literally was a chance conversation, because all the talk here was DJ was going to go and play professionally in Japan during the off season, and he did have an offer there, but his wife is going to give birth to their second baby within the next couple of weeks, and basically he said no to that, and I think everyone had just assumed he was going, and I asked the question. He said, "No, I'm not going." I said, "Well, I think we should have a chat." So bringing him into anytime you have an opportunity to bring someone of his caliber, into the NBL1 sphere is fantastic. So yeah, very exciting times here. It will take us a while to really get him integrated into the team, but it's a nice problem to have.
Oh, absolutely. I remember that was almost your dream signing when you first took over the job, and you probably thought it was unachievable, but now all of a sudden you win a championship, and look what can happen.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing. DJ was one of the first people I spoke to when I got the job. I think probably before I even took the job, and he'd already signed with Forrester at that stage. And I've always I said to him when I first spoke to him that I've always wanted to coach him. So now I get the opportunity to do that, and hopefully we can achieve some success along the way and do something special again.
No, very exciting, Scott. No, I didn't know that news, so you literally broke it to me. I know it's probably been announced somewhere and I've just missed it, but no, that's very exciting, and I look forward to following that. We'll come back next week, Scott, and catch up, and once the series is done in the NBL, and wrap up that season and look ahead to your season. And yeah, thanks again for joining us.
Too easy, mate. Anytime.
Okay, back now with Cody Ellis here on Hoop 7's Basketball Hustle. And before we get to the Games 3 and Game 4 of the NBL Championship Series, Cody, a bit for us to get through. I want to get your thoughts on a couple of different things. So the WNBL Finals now gets underway this week as well. Wednesday night it all starts with the Battle of the Melbourne teams. So we've got the Southside Flyers against the Melbourne Boomers. So their Game 1 will be played on Wednesday night. And then Game 1 between the Townsville Fire and the Perth Lynx. On Thursday night we'll get underway in Townsville. I think as it turned out, probably the best four teams have ended up making the finals. I know the Bendigo Spirit were in the top four for a lot of the season, but they fell away late. And I think the Perth Lynx are deserving of a final spot just with the firepower they've got on that team, and they can easily put up 100 points without even really trying. So I think it'll be a pretty exciting series between both lots of teams. The Flyers and the Boomers, I'll get your thoughts on first of all. The Flyers, obviously a totally different team without Lauren Jackson, which is unfortunate after she ruptured her Achilles, but they've still done well enough to get into that position, and they take on the Boomers, who are the reigning champions. They've got the MVP, Kayla George. What are your thoughts?
Oh, yeah, look, always a tough one. It's always good to see the Victorian rivals going at it, but look, Kayla, again, just been unbelievable as the MVP, obviously, is shown. But look, it's unfortunate with no Lauren Jackson. Yeah, that really does suck. I think.
A series of her going against Kayla George
would have been awesome, right?
Unbelievable.
It would have been unbelievable, and I'm sure Kayla would have loved that as well. Look, I think the Boomers obviously get that one done.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and as it turns out, without the Phoenix or United there for the NBL Finals, let's hope the crowds there turn out for this as well, and we see some good crowds really supporting this series too.
Yeah, hopefully. I think the product that the WNBL has on the floor now is at an all-time high. Yeah. So I don't see why they wouldn't draw massive crowds at the point.
The other series, the Townsville Fire, they ended up as the regular season champions, going to the finals on a pretty significant winning streak as well. So they're the form team, but the Perth Lynx are in some good form themselves. Nice rivalry building as well, because Ryan Petrick, the coach of the Lynx, made his feelings pretty clear. Even though I remember speaking to him post-game after the first game they played against Townsville, he was a little bit careful about what he said that we were allowed to print and what we weren't allowed to print, but his feelings on the whole situation with Shiloh Hill joining the Townsville Fire are I think pretty obvious for everyone to see. The fact that she's now part of that team and adds another weapon probably puts a target on Townsville's back while also making them harder to beat at the same time. So there'll be a bit of spice to this series. 2 high-scoring teams, 2 exciting teams to watch. How do you think it'll unfold?
Yeah, well, pardon the pun, but both teams full of firepower. It is unbelievable across the board. And then it is, Shannon Seabom.
Yes.
Coach of the Year for Townsville. Shout out to Shannon. He was one of my assistants when I was first at Sydney. So he's been unbelievable the past few years at the helm. Look, this is really going to be a cool little matchup. Obviously lots went down with Shyla and Shane at Sydney, and it is what it is. It is what it is. So adding Shyla to any team is going to be going to add a lot to them. But I do think I'm gonna back the home girls and go with Perth.
What's it like being part of a series like this where the 2 teams don't like each other, especially the head coaches? It's fair to say Ryan Petrick and Shannon Seabom won't be sharing too many words pre or post game during this series. What's it like being part of a series like that? You've been part of plenty of them.
Sure have. It's good. Well, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, and goes back to one of those things that is a big talking point even in the NBL in series, not shaking hands after games 1 and 2.
Should you wait until the series is finished?
I think so. I think so, because you just there's always that little bit that it could boil over in that handshake line. We've seen it way too many times. So look, they're the best series to be part of. Because both crowds get even more involved, and there's talk about it, and players get more hyped up, and look, I think it's going to be a fun series.
Do you think the home court advantage is something that helps tip it towards Townsville?
A little bit. But I think the Lynx are playing really good basketball right now. They've kind of, this back end of the season, really kind of switched gears, and I think that look, home court advantage is always a big thing. But look, I do think it's going to really go down to the wire. I'm looking forward to the series.
A couple of your Warwick Senators girls in there as well, and Chloe Forster coming off her best ever WNBL game last up when Ryan Petrick went into his bench a little bit in their last game against Canberra. I think she had 12 points in that game. Mackenzie Clinch-Hoycard got the start as well, so you'll be keeping a close eye on them.
Oh, absolutely. And Chloe was awesome. She just came out aggressive. I think she'd only scored 2 or 3 points in the season prior, and then came out ready to go, which was awesome. And then Ken's has been kind of a bit of a staple in the whole roster this whole season. She's been unbelievable. And yeah, look, big shout out to them, and hopefully they can get it done.
Get your thoughts on the award winners from the WNBL as well, Cody. I'll run through them all, and you can just tell me what stands out. So, as we touched on, the MVP for the season was Kayla George from the Melbourne Boomers. Coach of the Year, Shannon Seabom from Townsville. I'm very interested by this. All of a sudden, the field was almost run by a team that never came close to making the playoffs. So, Izzy Borlace won both Breakout Player of the Year and the Sixth Woman of the Year. Steph Talbot, Defensive Player of the Year. I might get your thoughts on that. Surprising that it comes from a team that finished so low.
Yeah, it is. It is, and I think it's tough with some of these awards. But look, I think realistically, the team's performance does need to come into consideration as well. It's not often that you get an MVP, say, for instance, that hasn't made at least the top 2. That's very rare. Obviously, we saw it here with Kayla and Melbourne, but yeah, it is a bit surprising to see lots of awards go to a team that didn't even look like really making playoff push.
Yeah, that's what I thought, but nothing against both. Obviously, Steph Talbot, who's a superstar,
absolutely,
and Borlace, who's a rising star as well. All WNBL teams then, Cody. So the all first team, Kayla George, Sammy Whitcomb, Tiana Hawkins, Christy Wallace, Kayla Thornton. The all second team, Jade Melbourne, Tiffany Mitchell, Lauren Nicholson, Steph Talbot, Lauren Scherf. Anything jump out, or anyone jump out that you feel might be a little bit unlucky?
That's
putting you on the spot.
That really is. Look, I think Keely Froling had a heck of a year. I think she was real consistent, and she averaged, I think it was just ridiculous numbers across the season. So, but look, I think it was very similar to the NBL this year, and just the pool of players this year is unbelievable, and it's obviously tough to only pick 2 teams out of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, look, I mean, I think they've probably hit the nail on the head with these 2 teams, though.
You'd have to think if Lauren Jackson didn't get hurt, she would have been
Oh,
part of
for
one
sure.
of those 2 teams
Yeah,
too.
absolutely.
All right, Cody. So we'll keep an eye on that. So by the time we come back next week, we'll know who's into the WNBL Grand Final. Now, before I put you on the spot with Games 3 and Game 4 of the NBL Championship Series, your NBL1 West season is getting very close, Cody, and all of a sudden you're going to have an old sparring partner to go up against with at the Willetton Tigers.
Yep.
What was your reaction when you found out that Mark Worthington had signed?
Oh, look, I wasn't shocked, but I was. You know, I've had a couple conversations with Wortho, played against him a couple times in domestic, and he's said that, you know, he feels really good and he wants to get back into it.
Okay.
So yeah, look, I'm happy he's back in the league. You know, to have a player of his caliber in the league is awesome, and I think he'll do wonders for the Tigers and just the young boys, because they still do have a fairly young squad there. So look, it's exciting. It's going to be really cool to play against him again.
Do you have any insight as to why he chose Willetton?
No idea. No idea. I haven't actually spoken to him properly about it yet, but I'll have to pick his brain.
He's got another teammate there. I mean, we've talked about Gordrock Gak throughout the NBL season, how impressive he was at the Brisbane Bullets and how perhaps they didn't utilise him as much as they could have as well. Gee, that's a tough front court when you throw Michael Vigor into it too.
Yeah, they're big and smart. So look, I think Gordrock's going to be a monster in this league. I think he's he really kind of found his own this year in the NBL, and you know, we saw him improve, and then all of a sudden wasn't playing. So I'm not sure what went on there. So I'm sure he'll want to come out and really start proving a point. So yeah, look, Willow's going to be tough. They're going to be really tough.
Do you put your hand up to go one-on-one with Wortho for
absolutely.
for 40 minutes?
Yeah, definitely. Neither of us can play 40 minutes, but, you know, we'll try.
Look forward to that. We'll have to check the schedule and see how early into the season you play the Tigers, Cody. How are your Warwick Senators shaping up? Obviously, let's start with your coach, Luke Brennan. Unfortunately, he's no longer with the Perth Wildcats, but that might be good news for you.
Yeah, it is. It's, I mean, it really does suck for him, and, you know, I feel for him. But, look, I think he'll certainly find his feet somewhere in the NBL at some point, because he certainly knows his stuff, and he's a hard worker in the video and all that sort of gear. So, look, from our point of view, it's great because, you know, he's not going to miss a whole lot.
Yes.
You know, I don't think he's going to the MVP ball, so he'll be able to coach us in the first game. And then, you know, we missed him for a couple of weeks because he went to the Summer League in midway through the season. So all that kind of stuff just falls by the wayside, and we'll have him for the season. So that's all good.
You played one season under him now, and really it was half a season because of, unfortunately, the amount of time he had to miss, even with the NBL season still going when your season started. Have you been? You're not going to say anything bad about him when he's your coach, but have you seen enough from him to suggest that he belongs in the NBL and he deserves another job somewhere else?
Yeah, absolutely. He knows his stuff. He's I really think that you know, teams that are in need of an extra assistant or, you know, video guys that really know the league, I think he would be one of the first guys you'd reach out to. You know, he understands the league. He's been in it for a while now, and yeah, look, I think he's just a really smart basketball mind.
What can you tell us about your squad, your roster that you've got coming into this season, Cody?
Yeah, looking good. Or
maybe should I say, what are you allowed to give away?
No, look, we're looking good. I think it's at that point now where, you know, preseason's becoming that grind, and we're still 3-4 weeks away from our first game. You know, everyone kind of starts getting on each other's nerves at training, and it gets a little more physical, which I think is good. I think it's really good, and. No, we had our first scratch match against the Redbacks the other day, and look, it was not great basketball by either team. I'm not going to lie, but it's always good to play against someone different, and kind of blow those cobwebs out a little bit. But yeah, look, I think we're looking good. We'll have our import in, Hussein Ford. He got in over the weekend, so it'd be good to, you know, bring him in and introduce him to the stuff and get him up to speed, and I think he'll be a good addition for us.
Well, we saw how good he was last season at the Goldfields Giants. How much does it help when you bring in a new import if he's already familiar with the league?
Oh, it makes a big difference. I think that certainly has a hand in imports. If they've been around the league and, they're successful in the league, I think that's huge because, each league around the world is ref so differently. I hate to always harp on about the reffing, but it plays such a big factor. And for a high energy guy like him, I think to understand how the league is whistled, I think is huge. So look, I think he'll slot in perfectly for us and just give us that extra little boost.
All right. When we come back next week, Cody, we might go through some of the other teams that you're going to be coming up against and who's looking good coming into the season as well. But two guys I do want to get your thoughts on just to see where you think their immediate future lies. You've played against both of them in your time with the Senators. Alex Dukas and Cole Bowen, we were watching them just before playing for St. Mary's. They're both about to finish their college careers. Amazingly, they're both championship winners already at their local clubs in the SBL, with Kyle Bowen winning one at that stacked Redbacks team with Sean Redditch leading the way back in 2017, and then Alex Dukas, he was a star on that team that won for the Geraldton Buccaneers in 2019 as well, what turned out to be the last ever SBL championship. First of all, do you think they come back to play in the NBL1 this season? And beyond that, do they immediately sign in the NBL? Is that where you think they'll be?
Yeah, NBL1 is an interesting one because they'll probably have to finish out school, I'm sure. If that's what they want to do anyway. Look, at that point, you'd probably say, I want to finish it out because you're so close. But look, I do think that they will be on NBL teams' radars for sure. I think they've both had really good college careers and both really good players. I think Dukas is one of those big guards that's really found his own at St. Mary's, and just to see he was dominant when he played with Gero. He was such a big part of that championship team. So look, just to see his game evolve has been awesome. And then, Bowen obviously is just a big dog. He's a monster. So I think any team could use a guy like that. I think the Cats could use a guy like that. And look, having local talent in the league is always good. So I'm sure they've both been reached out to, or will be reached out to by multiple NBL teams.
Absolutely. Last one on college basketball, Cody. You've got obviously a strong connection to St. Louis, and you always will. It's a big part of your heart, and the women's team has just done something pretty special.
They certainly have. So they've won their first ever A10 title, which is unbelievable. And new coach this year. They started off the season extremely rocky. I think they were playing a D2 team in one of their first games and were down like 28 or 29 to 1 or something like that in their first game. So they've come a long way. Just kind of hit their stride at the perfect time of year and figured it out. And it was really cool to see. So congratulations to the girls.
No, absolutely. All right, Cody. Now I've delayed it long enough. Now I'm going to have to put you on the spot. We've got Game 3 of the NBL Championship Series at Kudos Bank Arena between the Sydney Kings and the New Zealand Breakers on Friday night. They've already sold more than 13,000 tickets for this game. So I think they were pretty happy last Friday to have 13,500 for the game. But this could be everywhere upwards of 15,000 for game 3 on Friday night. We don't know about Xavier Cooks and Derek Walden Jr., but we saw what the Kings can do without them. What do you think happens in Game 3?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting one. I can't see New Zealand playing that same way again. And I think a lot of it comes down to the health of those two guys. I'm not really sure what Walton's done. It looked a lot more than a cramp.
It can't be cramp if you can't play 2 days later.
I honestly thought that he'd kind of ruptured something through his hip flexor. That's what it looked like when he first... Because, it looked like he really hurt something. He was on the ground for a long time in a lot of pain. And it didn't look good because it was non-contact, and that's never a good thing. So I'm hoping he's healthy. I'm hoping it was, just something small. But
the similarities to last season is incredible. They lost Jalen Adams in Game 1 against the Jack Jumpers as well. They were able to pull it out. But it's amazing that you lose your point guard in the Game 1 of both grand final series.
Yeah, who'd have thought it? I know, it's crazy, right? So I mean, that it really is brutal. It really is brutal. I think it's tough to see the bench step up the way they did in this game too for a whole series.
Yep.
And that's not, hanging on at all. That's
it's reality.
It's a reality that it's good to do that for a game. Like that's certainly possible, but to do it over a whole series is it's a very tough thing to do. So look, I think we do see Xav. I think he'll be okay. I think that Corky will end up fine. Hopefully Washington let him play.
Yes.
But look, I mean, the way it's gone, it's just going to be who's going to win on the road.
Yep.
Who's going to win at home? Sorry.
At home, yeah.
So look, I think New Zealand get this one. I do think New Zealand get this one.
Game 4 will be at Spark Arena, and if that happens, they'll be playing to wrap up the championship on their home floor.
Yep.
And there's going to be more than 9,000 people at Spark Arena. They're expecting it to be a record crowd at Spark Arena. That Auckland crowd is always loud, no matter how many people are in the building. But when it's a packed house, it would be even more significant, especially if they're trying to wrap up a championship. If it goes to the way you're expecting, would they wrap it up on Sunday?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No, I think the Kings get it. I think it goes, road team again, and it goes to 5 back on Wednesday, back in Sydney.
And then you can save your prediction for next week.
Yeah. I've got to think a whole week about who's going to win that, because that's literally, I think that one's going to be a flip of the coin. So, look, I really hope it does go to 5, and I hope these games are close and competitive. And look, I mean, both games 1 and 2 were. I kind of feel like they were wrapped up by the winning team for most of the game anyway. But there was always that little bit in the back of my mind that well, Sydney could make a run here in game 1, and I was expecting New Zealand to make a run in game 2, and they just didn't. So, look, fascinating series, and look, I do hope that it gets to 5.
No, let's hope it plays out how you expect, Cody. And thank you for joining us once again. Thank you for everyone for tuning in. Thank you to Hoop 7 for making it possible. There was a lot to get through once again, Cody. We might have only had 2 games to look back on, but we still managed to fill up an hour without too much problem. So thank you to everyone for tuning in, and I'll let you have the final word, Cody, on what you're most looking forward to over the next 5 days.
For seeing Willetton and Cooks back out on the floor, I think Sydney at full strength is fun to watch. So hopefully those guys are healthy and ready to go.